Welcome to another episode of Forgotten Uniques, and as promised, I've changed the camera angle. Don't worry, I'm not about to ask you to grab a drink. Let's get into it. In this series, I'm covering unique items in Path of Exile that aren't used very much right now, taking a look at how they function and how they interact with other mechanics in the game, especially some of the more recent additions such as Ascendancy reworks or new unique items. If you want to check out the full Forgotten Uniques playlist, you can find the link in the video description below. Today's video is all about Cerberus Limb, a unique sceptre which is exclusive to Delve. It can be found in the Grand Architect's Temple, which can sometimes spawn as part of the Vaal Outpost biome in the Azurite Mine. The boss that resides there, Ahuatotli the Blind, is one of 3 exclusive Delve bosses. This boss can drop the Cerberus Limb unique sceptre, and it appears to have about a 50% drop rate. Let's take a look at the modifiers on Cerberus Limb. 70 to 100% increased spell damage. This is a decent increased damage roll, and with it being generic spell damage as well rather than a specific elemental damage type, it's going to be more universally useful on a wide variety of builds. A tier 3 increased spell damage modifier on a crafted sceptre rolls between 70 and 84%, while a tier 2 modifier rolls between 85 and 99%. So this modifier is somewhere between those two rolls depending on which end of the scale you're on, with a perfect 100% roll just barely breaching into tier 1 modifier territory. Next up, 15 to 20% increased cast speed. This is another generic modifier which is going to be useful on many different builds. 15 to 20% is a bit weaker of a roll when compared to the increased spell damage in terms of crafted sceptre modifier tiers, with this one being the equivalent of around a tier 4 increased cast speed modifier on a crafted sceptre. So not quite as good, but still a generally useful stat to have. And now we move on to the unique modifiers on this sceptre, beginning with 0.5% of spell damage leached as life if equipped shield has at least 30% chance to block. This modifier is the beginning of the theme of this item. The stats that you ultimately gain from Cerberus Limb are defined by the shield that you have equipped in your offhand slot. This modifier in particular is an on or off modifier. If your equipped shield has 30% chance to block or more, you'll have 0.5% of spell damage leached as life. Anything lower than 30% chance to block and you'll gain nothing from this modifier. To be clear though, this is the inherent chance to block stat granted by the shield, which is improved by any local additional chance to block modifiers on that shield. For example, Red Blade Banner is a shield which has the painted tower shield base type, which has 25% chance to block. It also has a local modifier which provides plus 5% chance to block, bringing this stat up to 30% in total. Equipping Red Blade Banner alongside Cerberus Limb would enable the Leech modifier on this unique sceptre. However, let's take a look at another example, Duresso's Courage. This unique shield has 25% chance to block, and it has a modifier which provides plus 100% chance to block attack damage if you have blocked spell damage recently. This modifier is global, and therefore the additional attack damage block provided if you've blocked spell damage recently doesn't increase the inherent block granted by the shield. So even if this modifier is active, it wouldn't enable the Leech modifier on Cerberus Limb. Now, Spell Life Leech is a rare stat, and it's another modifier on Cerberus Limb which is going to be useful on most builds, just like the increased spell damage and increased cast speed. However, the existence of damage type specific Life Leech available as an Eldritch implicit modifier on crafted gloves makes modifiers such as this one a lot less significant, but it may still be useful in cases where you're using unique gloves, or when you want to use that particular Eldritch implicit slot for a different modifier. Next up, we have 3 modifiers which grant a particular defensive stat based on a different defensive stat which is present on your equipped shield. Plus 1 to maximum energy shield per 5 armor on equipped shield, plus 5 armor per 5 evasion rating on equipped shield, and plus 20 to evasion rating per 5 maximum energy shield on equipped shield. Let's look at the first of these 3 modifiers to get an idea of how they work. This one will provide maximum energy shield based upon the armor on your equipped shield, And once again, just like the Leech modifier, this must be inherent armor from the shield base type and any relevant local modifiers. For example, the Anticipation is a unique shield which has an increased armor modifier, and it also has a modifier that grants plus 1,500 to 3,000 armor if you've blocked recently. The increased armor modifier is a local modifier which increases the inherent armor on the shield base type. Meanwhile, the added armor modifier if you've blocked recently modifier is global. It won't add armor to the inherent armor present on the shield. So the energy shield gained from Cerberus Limb will be based on the inherent armor provided by the shield, but you wouldn't gain any extra maximum energy shield from this modifier when the Anticipation's global armor modifier is active. So how can you make the best use of these modifiers? Well, there's an immediate synergy here with Aegis Aurora, a shield which provides a good amount of armor and energy shield and also satisfies the Leech condition on Cerberus Limb due to its high block chance. With a good roll on the local increased armor and energy shield modifier and a good base defense roll on the Champion Kite shield along with 30% quality, you can get around 1,300 armor and 265 energy shield from Aegis Aurora, which would translate into gaining an additional 260 maximum energy shield and 1,060 evasion rating from Cerberus Limb. That's a lot of bonus defensive stats gained from the weapon slot. The energy shield especially is going to be notably powerful in such a build using Aegis Aurora, and while the evasion rating may be a bit less useful generally, you could consider attempting to make use of Iron Reflexes to convert that evasion into armor, if you could somehow make it to that location on the passive tree or find another way to obtain the keystone. Meanwhile, if you wanted to use Chaos Inoculation, you could always convert the Life Leech gained from Cerberus Limb into Energy Shield Leech instead using the Ghost Reaver keystone, but do be aware that this keystone also prevents you from recharging Energy Shield. Now, there's several of these notable synergies for Cerberus Limb with unique shields. Emperor's Vigilance has a huge amount of armor and energy shield, allowing you to gain a further chunk of energy shield from Cerberus Limb, and a very good amount of evasion rating there too. But be aware of the modifiers on this shield which change how damage interacts with your energy shield based on blocked or unblocked hits. There's also Lionized Remorse, which satisfies the Leech condition while providing a big chunk of armor to allow Cerberus Limb to grant a very considerable amount of maximum energy shield. This shield also has a huge amount of life, so the combination of these two uniques provides an interesting platform for a hybrid life and energy shield build. Leper's Alms also satisfies the Leech condition and grants a large amount of evasion and energy shield, translating into a lot of bonus armor and evasion coming in from Cerberus Limb. And Magna Eclipsis is another interesting one. This shield has base defenses for each type, and the combination of these two uniques will provide a very large amount of total maximum energy shield along with a good amount of armor and a bit of evasion there as well. Peripatia is an interesting option too. This is another high evasion and energy shield base for a bunch of bonus armor and evasion rating from Cerberus Limb, but this unique shield is more interesting due to the existence of synthesized implicits which can be very powerful as well. There's also Azurite's Reflection, another powerful shield option to be considered with Cerberus Limb. However, this unique sceptre doesn't necessarily need to be used with a unique shield of course. And when we're considering crafted shields, this is where the modifiers on Cerberus Limb can get a little bit crazy. In particular, the energy shield based on armor modifier. A well-crafted Colossal Tower shield can get in the region of 2,800 armor or more, which would translate into a ridiculous 560 maximum energy shield gained from Cerberus Limb. That's quite frankly an absurd amount of maximum energy shield, and you could then convert the increased spell damage from the sceptre into increased attack damage using Battle Mage's Cry or Crown of Eyes, and then use this setup in a Shield Crush build if you wanted to. Alright, so Cerberus Limb isn't used very much at all in Necropolis, so why is that the case? Well, one thing that should be mentioned at the end of this video is the niche that Cerberus Limb is filling. Being a weapon that provides some level of defense, it attempts to be an option for builds which are seeking a middle ground from offense and defense gained from the weapon slot, whilst providing a level of customization via the equipped shield. One very notable competition for this particular niche is the Darkseer, which was buffed significantly in 3.24 Necropolis to be a lot stronger. This unique weapon is going to typically be a far stronger option on the majority of builds, as it's not reliant on your equipped shield, and the offense gained from gem levels and malediction is going to be superior in most setups. With that said, however, Cerberus Limb can massively outscale the energy shield gained from the Darkseer in the right setup, so it's still going to be an interesting option in a very niche subset of builds. Thank you to my patrons for your ongoing support. If you enjoy the content I make here on YouTube, consider supporting the channel by becoming a patron. All of the information can be found by following the link in the description below. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.